Sage Wanderer here, coming at you from my cabin down by the creek. So today I want to talk about these anti-ICE protests that are happening at ICE facilities around the country. And I want to talk specifically about this ambush in Alvarado, Texas, of an ICE detention center. And then I want to share with you what I know about the big picture, what I knew before all of this started, and what this proves to me that what I knew before is true, and what is coming in the future. Where is this headed? What are they trying to accomplish? What's the big picture and the overall goal here? What's the end game? But before I get started on that, I want to thank all of you who support this channel. Thank you so much for your thumbs up, your subscription, your sharing of videos, your kind comments, and most especially your financial support. This channel is funded exclusively by viewers like you. Your kind donations through the links in the description below, to my Cash App, to PayPal, and to my post office box help fund my meager little basic lifestyle. I live in a cabin in the woods. I'm a one-man operation, and what I need from y'all is not much, just enough to keep the lights on, keep food in my pantry, keep my car on the road, so I can dedicate all of my time to research and to digging into these topics and finding out the truth that I bring you on this channel on a weekly, bi-weekly basis. So thank you so much for your support. Please consider becoming a financial supporter. If you find the content interesting, if it's at all enlightening, or if you find me entertaining, please consider dropping me some cash in the description in the links below. So, what exactly is going on? Well, I told you back in the early spring that right after the election, the left launched a counter plan, a what if Donald Trump gets elected plan, to destabilize our country, to cause chaos to erupt in our country, and potentially cause Donald Trump to either be removed from office by force, or through international pressure, or through an interaction by the government, all right, an internal coup. And so they wanted to, they wanted their followers, they wanted their people on the street to take to the streets. They told them back in the spring, you need to rise up against this fascist. You need to rise up against Donald Trump, who's a dictator. He's going to do A, B, and C, and if you don't stop him, this is the end of democracy. This is the end of America. We have to do this to save America. That those people that are out there attacking these ICE facilities, fighting with police, and in the case of the Alvarado ambush, opening fire on law enforcement and shooting at people, these people think they're saving our country. They think they're doing the right thing. They think they're correct and on the right side of the issue. They think they are patriots. And if you're on social media, you've probably seen a groundswell of support for these protests amongst everyday people, and a raising of the anti-Trump rhetoric to a higher level on social media. There's friends of mine that I didn't even think were political, right, that I know just on a one-on-one basis here in Oklahoma, that are all agitated and worked up over these mass deportations. And a lot of people in the press, on social media, they're comparing this mass deportation and these detention facilities like the Alligator Alcatraz. They're comparing these things to concentration camps and Adolf Hitler's rounding up of Jewish people in Germany in the 1930s and 40s, and how that this is, they're comparing this, and they're claiming this proves Donald Trump is a dictator. See, I told you, he was a dictator. They were calling him that back before the election. They were saying the first time that he wouldn't step down, and they were shocked when he did step down and handed power over to Biden. And, you know, they're claiming he's not going to step down at the end of this, and he's just going to be a dictator forever. And there's nothing to base that on, right? But unfortunately, well, fortunately for America, and unfortunately for maybe the future of relations between the left and the right, Donald Trump has been following through with his promise to deport people who are here illegally, especially people who have violent crime convictions, commit violent crimes while they're here, or are currently under investigation for a violent crime, and they're here illegally. And this is the bulk and the majority of people that are being deported. But that's not what the people on the left are being told. Like, they're being told a lot of lies, and they believe them wholeheartedly. You might have seen this on social media if you have some friends that lean to the left. They're buying these lies. One lie that they're buying that's ridiculous is that President Trump and ICE officers are putting people that they detain here in America on airplanes and taking them out in the ocean and kicking them out in the ocean alive and throwing them out of airplanes alive. There are people that actually believe that. Of course, that's ridiculous. One of the things that they use to fool you into thinking that's true, into believing it, is that there are human smuggling operations in the Mediterranean that go wrong from time to time, and in other places. And what you end up with is coyotes who are smuggling people, kicking them off of boats into the water, and their bodies washing up on shore. And they take that story and conflate it into a made-up narrative that Donald Trump is actually responsible for kicking human beings out of aircraft over the ocean, which is, there's no proof for that. It's completely made up. But people believe it. People believe that Donald Trump is also deporting American citizens. They will tell you that he's in the process and has been and is arresting U.S. citizens, people born in this country, right? People that are here legally, and he's taking them and deporting them and putting them in detention facilities, putting them in work camps. And this is all propaganda, right? This is all trumped up, right? Why? Why are they lying like this? Why are they not telling the truth about what's actually going on and painting this narrative of Donald Trump as a dictator? It's because they want to not just crush Donald Trump's presidency. They don't want to just remove him from office. They want to demonize anyone who voted for him, anyone who shares his opinion on closing our borders, anybody who wants and believes in private gun ownership, anybody who believes in America first, right? Anybody who believes that we should tariff our foreign competitors before we tax our citizens, right? Taxing our citizens should be a last resort for raising money, not the go-to. If you think that way, then you are diametrically opposed to the New World Order, to the globalist agenda. The globalist agenda of a one world government, of a homogenization of all the people on Earth, ran by a central committee, right? Ran basically like communism for the whole world. That's what they're in favor of. And your gun rights stand in their way. Your freedom of speech stands in their way, right? Your ownership of property stands in their way, right? Your political ideas about borders and citizenship, all of that stands in the way of their agenda, right? So they had this agenda before Donald Trump even rolled out his plan for deportation. They just didn't know what be in their bonnet. What was the thing they were going to use? What's their theme for the summer of hell that they were planning on bringing this summer that I warned you about clear back in February? So the thing is that they're trying to do with this is they're trying to goad Trump into having a heavier and heavier hand. What they want to do is they want to create out of thin air outrage against Donald Trump to the point where regular people will start to consider acts of violence, violent protest, violent ambushes like the one we saw in Alvarado. And that kind of hits close to home for me. If you're a fan of the channel, I did some prison ministry. I did prison ministry in Alvarado at the medium security prison in Alvarado. And that I have friends in Alvarado. In fact, this recent ambush, if you haven't heard the news, these individuals came there together to this small town, and they used fireworks and graffiti to try to draw out the ICE detention facility officers there so they could get them out from their safe position. And then they opened fire on them with AR-15s, firing more than 30 rounds and actually shooting an Alvarado police officer in the neck who was responding. And I got a good buddy who, the last I heard, he was a patrol officer on the Alvarado Police Department. And I immediately went, man, I hope that wasn't Steve Mack that got shot. And since I couldn't uncover the identity of the person who was shot, I decided to kind of work backwards and look up my old friend Steve and find out if Steve even still worked there. And luckily, I found out he transferred to the Grandview, Texas Police Department. So he's no longer in Alvarado. But, I have a connection to that little small town just south of Dallas. It wasn't far from where I used to live. I used to live in DeSoto, Texas, which is just north of there. And I still to this day have kind of shirt-tail relatives that live in Alvarado, spend a lot of time there. And I just can't believe this is happening in that small town, right? But any place where ICE is involved, whether it's a detention center or an ICE facility of any kind, is going to be targeted. And the reason being is they want to paint this as a Hitler-like mass deportation and imprisonment. And they want to tell whatever lies necessary to paint the ugliest picture they can to get as many people involved in their anti-government, right? Their anti-government, anti-Trump insurrection, right? And what they're hoping to do, what is the long game? What is their plan? When they hatched the idea of a summer of protests and violence and insurrection and terrorist attacks, when they started activating their base and planting the seed, even before Trump enacted these deportation efforts, right? Even before that was on the table, they knew they were going to do something this summer, and they just didn't know what was going to be their theme. But what's their goal? What were they hoping would happen? It isn't just to slander Donald Trump because, he's done politically. He's not going to run for a third term. He can't, right? Plus, he's getting really old. I imagine he'll be one and done here. He'll be over with. And it'll be up to Vance and other people in the party to carry on the agenda of Make America Great Again. But the problem they have with all of us is they have a problem with us because we stand in the way of the globalist agenda. The globalist agenda is to disarm the United States. The globalist agenda is to do away with U.S. sovereignty and make it a part of the international community. They want to put America last. They want to deplete America of its resources. They want to rape America's natural resources and spread them around the world. They want to enslave the American people and take us all down a notch. Right? America is the one thing standing in the way of the New World Order and their globalist agenda. And so they're trying to create an environment that will destabilize life in the United States. Then they want to try to trigger I had a conversation with one of my friends that I know in person. We were conversing online. And, he thinks that's never going to happen. These people are never going to overthrow the government. They don't have to overthrow the government. Enough of the world, enough of foreign countries, enough European nations and their leaders hate not just Trump, but all the Americans that voted for him. All of us who are opposed to this new agenda, this new universal government, this new forcing all nations to be the same. Right? They want to take away your rights. They can't stand the Constitution. They can't stand the individual liberties that we have in this country. It can't exist and coexist with their plans. So they have to take us down. And, my friend was like, well, they're never going to overthrow the government. They don't have enough people. They tried some stuff back in 2020 and it didn't get very far. And the thing is, all they have to do is escalate. All they got to do is trigger the government into overreacting. All they got to do is have a few stories where massive shootouts or bombings take place, right? Mass killings. The kind of thing we've already seen coming from the left. Like, this has been more and more a theme. And it's one of the reasons why they don't want to talk about what happened in Las Vegas during that concert a few years back. What was that, back in 2019 or so? 2018? because it was political, and they want to pass this stuff off like the Christian school attack by the non-binary person, and they want to paint that as being non-political, when the fact of the matter is all this stuff is political. It's more likely that violence today is political than it is random, and they don't want you to see that, right? They've been covering that up, but it's all building to the point where they're trying to trigger the federal government into becoming heavy-handed. I kind of regret the alligator Alcatraz thing, because it's a great way to fuel the left. That fuels their people. That has got more people triggered than you can imagine. That they're comparing that to Nazi concentration camps. They're calling it a concentration camp. They're calling it a Nazi work camp. They're calling it an extermination camp, right? And, as much as Donald Trump likes to play with people and mess with them, it's really, in my opinion, not that smart, right? He needs to take the high road. And that's a strange place for him. I'll be honest with you. That's not his go-to choice. And the left knows that. So they're trying to bait him into more and more controversial reactions. It's a classic narcissistic situation. The narcissist wins when they poke at you, prod at you, mess with your mind, gaslight you, lie to you, mess with your head until you're so furious that you have a reaction. Then they roll videotape on your reaction and they show everybody like, see, he's abusive. He yelled at me. He called me names. He threw something. It's because you've been torturing him and playing mind games with him for months or even years, and to the point where you snap, right? That's how a narcissist wins and makes you look like the bad guy. There's a lot of good folks out there that put up with a lot of stuff from people just to get mislabeled because they finally lost control of their emotion, right? Because they've been mistreated for so long. And this is what they're trying to accomplish with Donald Trump. They're trying to bait the Trump administration and all of the MAGA people, all of us, into becoming more and more brutal and more unforgiving and more, when you need to take the high road, right? Hey, I ain't in favor of putting these people up in 5-star hotels, but we also can't chain them to gators in the swamp either and hope they get eat. You know what I mean? Now both of those are extremes, and the truth is somewhere in the middle. But appearances are everything right now. This is a battle for the hearts and minds of the American people, because their overall goal is terrifying. If you understood the goal of the left, and it's just Trump just happens to be a consolidation and a representation and a emulsification of everything they hate about the American dream, everything they hate about you and me, and this flag behind us, right? And the guns in my cabinet, right? And the freedom of being a landowner in the wilderness and living like I do. It's a threat to them, right? They don't want you making your own food. They don't want you collecting rainwater. They want you to be totally dependent on the state, so the state then has complete control of you and can tell you what you do from the moment you wake up until the moment you go to bed. They can even tell you what to dream about. And people like us, right? People like the Sheep Pen, people like the viewers of this channel, right? We stand in their way because we're not going to play that. We're not falling for the banana in the tailpipe. But their method right now is working, and it could, in fact, work, because all they've got to do is cause this to escalate. They do something to an ICE facility, and then the next time they try something with an ICE facility, all the people inside shoot back, and there's a massacre, right? All this has got to do is kind of start to look like Venezuela. All this has got to do is kind of start to look like Haiti, right? All this has got to do is look like it did in the summer of 2020, but take it up a notch. A lot of people think that back in 2020, Donald Trump should have been more aggressive in dealing with those protests. But I think that's what they want. It's that narcissistic baiting, okay? Because their end goal is an international intervention. There, you've waited 19 minutes and 42 seconds for the big reveal. That their goal is to trigger an international intervention. United Nations peacekeeping forces invading the United States, disarming our military, disarming our people, the declaration of martial law, right? The defining of America as a dangerous, out of control military dictatorship, right? That is victimizing their own people. And therefore, that gives us the right to send in foreign troops, right? To seize roadways, rail yards, airports, shipyards, to control the flow of goods and services, to control the behavior of the people, but most importantly, to do away with the Constitution and reboot America in a more United Nations friendly, a more international friendly community method. Right? Where our speech is censored, where we don't have the right to self-defense, we don't have the right to private property, we don't have the American dream. The goal is to destroy the American dream. The goal is to destroy American freedoms and human rights and individuality. They want to homogenize us all into Frenchmen, essentially, right? They want to turn this nation into Europe. And to do so, they have to do away with people like me and you. So what looks like a bunch of screwballs who decided to make a run at a detention facility in Alvarado is really just one tentacle, one tip of the iceberg, one piece of the bigger puzzle. It's really just a type and shadow and a glimpse of things to come. That this is going to continue throughout President Trump's tenure here as president. And by the time we have another election, their goal is to have destabilized the United States until we can't have one, right? Until it's unsafe to go to the polls, until it's unsafe to travel in American cities because of the random violence occurring, because of people who are worked up over false narratives, over fake news, and they're trying to fight a monster that doesn't exist. And the goal of the overlords is to create a monster. If they can turn us into monsters, if they can turn us into irrational people, if they can turn the Trump administration into a military fascist dictatorship, they will. If they can trigger them into it. That's the goal. We'll see if President Trump falls for the bait. I've been warning about this for about a year now, that was their goal if Donald Trump were to win the election, was to paint him as a fascist and corner him into acting like one. And anything, any little piece, any little misstep he gives them, they're going to capitalize on it, and they're going to inflate it, and they're going to blow it up, and they're going to mix it with a false narrative and a false news story and a bunch of fake news to trigger the average person into doing horrific things and to backing their movement. The bottom line is they can't have their one world order as long as the United States still stands and the Constitution is still in place. I don't know. Tell me what you think in the comments section. Is this just a bunch of goofballs blowing off steam, or is this part of a highly organized attempt at a coup in our nation? They never want another Trump to arise, and they're going to do whatever it takes to stop him. Tell me what you think in the comments section. Don't forget to support the channel. If you enjoyed this, if you've been entertained for the last 24 minutes, please consider leaving a donation in the links in the description below. I could sure use the help. I live on a shoestring budget around here, and it's always rob Peter to pay Paul, so I would appreciate any help you can give me. And we'll see you next time from my cabin down by the creek.